Hello there and welcome to a new video from me, Dane, regarding ailments and how they work, especially for our Bleeding Edge build, which I know a lot of you are playing, and I really can wait for some patches and buffs to other skills, so might in the future play something else. Disclaimer first, as always, there are links in the description to other videos which I might refer to in this one, as well as whatever I'm going to link there, so check it out. There might be something helpful in there that I will link to explain stuff here in a better fashion, or some extra information regarding that. Disclaimer 2, I will not stream any more Warzone for now on my Twitch channel. I will prepare for the next PoE League and just do some variety streaming until then. And for now, it's good. I mean, it's fine. The end game is a little bit short in terms of what content we can play. It just feels a little bit boring, and there's a lot of things that should still get fixed, patched, and so on and so on. For example, like half the skill trees are not working and so on, which we already discussed. But let's get into the video on how ailments work, how to apply ailments correctly, and so on and so on. So we'll start with, of course, the gear. So first of all, there are abilities that can scale off the damage types of your weapon, and there are skills that cannot. So, for example, there are things like Bleeding Edge, which are like, yeah, it says it converts base physical to rend, but actually what it does, it just converts everything. So, having any specific element, material damage, whatever on your weapon does not matter. Like, the weapon, or the skill in this case, completely does not care about what the fuck on the weapon is. Like, if it's sacred, or if it's shadow, or if it's extra rend, or whatever it might be, it completely is not interested in any of that. It will just take all the damage that there is, convert it into rend damage, and then will scale that. So it's completely relevant for skills like that. But there are also skills like, for example, Tracker's Reach, which basically just says like, yeah, we just deal 40% of weapon damage. So that will convert this skill to a skill that can use your weapon, which is not normal for all. Then, like, for example, there's Blood for Blood, which still deals burn and shock because it is not considered an attack, even though there's a skill tag, which is like 90% of the cases those skill tags really don't do shit for you, but basically it still considers just your highest ailments of your gear and not of your weapon, because it is not considering anything of that. So it will still just deal burn and shock if you've not taken damage. If we've taken damage, it will change that towards dealing, for me, shadow damage and then poison damage, because that's the highest ailment on my weapon, but shadow damage is guaranteed, so it overrides the second ailment in our build, but we'll get to that later. So the basic premise is every skill in the game is able to apply up to one ailment if it hits an enemy. That means the type of ailment and not the amount of stacks it can apply. There are skills like, for example, Mark Purity, which can just instantly give 10 curse stacks, or Tracker's Reach, which just instantly give you 2 bleed stacks instead of 1, right? And there's also differentiation between guaranteed ailments. For example, in Tracker's Reach case, that will be the stasis stack that is guaranteed, and ailments that come from your gear, which for our example would be the poison, right? So we are also using this node right here. This is the Grievous Afflictions node, which will increase the maximum amounts of ailments any skill in the game can inflict onto an enemy by 1, so we can inflict 2 ailments per skill use. So that is changing our Bleeding Edge from the bleed chance only to bleed and shock. Next up, which I've already discussed before, is like with a differentiation between a few skills like Bleeding Edge with the poison and bleed, or shock and bleed, or Tracker's Reach with stasis and poison. So Tracker's Reach is taking into account that we are using a weapon that has toxic damage on attacks with this weapon, and there's things like Bleeding Edge which does not take that into account and just converts everything into rend. And there are also other skills like that that deal or that are dealing damage after the same principle like Bleeding Edge does. And there are also a lot of skills that deal the same damage like Tracker's Reach. So for some skills you have to consider what is on your weapon, and for some skills you don't. Next up, how does an ability choose what is it dealing with any type of ailment damage? So what it's doing is basically just checking what is the highest damage or the highest average damage that is applied to this skill via the gear or whatever. So for our case in Tracker's Reach is definitely poison because we have 144 toxic damage here and we cannot scale that high with any other skill or any other like gear slot that we have right now. So it will obviously choose the poison score. You can still check this right here in this section, but this is sometimes bugged, or it's basically bugged 90% of the time, so don't keep so much attention to that. But for Tracker's Reach's case, it will just check, alright, so we have toxic damage, that is obviously the highest, so I'll just choose toxic damage. That's pretty straightforward in that case. For other abilities, though, they would just ignore the toxic and rend because it's on your weapon, and it will just not get applied to those, so you should still check the ability itself. For example, Warpath will take those. On the other hand, Blood for Blight doesn't, because it just doesn't take your weapon into account for its damage calculation yet, unless we are obviously taking damage. That's what the rune does for us. If we're not taking any damage on our health is at 100%, it does not trigger and will still apply whatever our highest ailments are without our weapon, which is in this case Burning Shock from our one ring. So you can control it in the way that you're like, I know that Blood for Blood is not dealing anything if I'm at full life, so I just try to stack Fire and Lightning on attacks as high as I can, so I can just get those two for free basically. And I would just try to keep Toxic and Rend on my other slots as low as possible. You can still stack Physical totally fine, there's no minus for that or something like that. Oh god. A spontaneous yawn. But yeah, you can just stack Physical completely fine, and you can still stack Toxic and Rend totally fine, unless the total damage combined from all your accessories not succeeds, but overpowers or is higher than the amount of fire and or lightning on your other ring. Also keep in account that Freeze, as of now, does jack shit for you, because basically what Freeze does, it's not like a stacking ailment, like the others are, like Shock is stacking and then just applying the ticks and so on, and Fire is stacking to apply more burn damage with the stacks increasing and so on. And Freeze is doing, it's just a 1 or a 0 if it's 1 the enemy is frozen and the element is completely removed upon applying it, or yeah, just it's not frozen. So there's no ailment that we in our build can benefit of, and it will just freeze enemies basically. For the ailment stacking build it is, which is actually the meta at the moment, because everybody's game with ailments, everybody just wants to apply all those ailments or deal ailment damage, but freeze is technically not the best and not recommended by a lot of people for that case. So keep that in mind. But yeah, that's how ailments choose on which ability they are going. So basically just try to manage those in that case. It's sometimes a little bit fishy, and the game is still having a lot of problems calculating your other damage types, if it's material, elemental, whatsoever, and also like dealing with the ailment stuff. Sometimes there's this node, Immortal Offering. It is a little bit buggy still, like there are a lot of problems with this node in terms of how it calculates damage. Sometimes it just grants you damage buff, sometimes it will only increase this ailment's damage, sometimes it will just give you, for whatever reason, a flat damage number corresponding to the ailment onto your already existing damage, so it would just add like 1,000 toxic damage onto here, even though it's only supposed to increase my damage by 25%. It's really fishy, and it can really be tilting sometimes, or just basically destroy a lot of your like build or potential of your build or whatsoever. So, oh god, again. Oh. So please keep that in mind, that as of now it's a little bit tricky to get around that. But there are a lot of abilities that guarantee your ailments. For example, this guarantees me stasis. This will guarantee me bleed because we are dealing rand damage, of course. This will guarantee me cursed. Yes, and then there are things like this where we can guarantee poison with our weapon. Here we can guarantee whatever we have on our accessories, which for my case is shock. This will also include the burn then, and obviously also like the shadow. If we are getting hit, then we can, for our build, guarantee stuff like the weakness stacks from here, so we can also cover sacred and so on. And there are a lot of ways to apply all kinds of ailments in this game, like if it's via block, if it's via taking damage or cursing enemies or pulling enemies to you, whatever you're doing. And there are a lot of things that scale off that. But that is basically how ailments work. So TLDR again, some abilities care about your weapon and what is on there, and some abilities just don't. For example, Tracker's Reach does care if there's poison on there to choose it for its second ailment. Again, stasis is guaranteed, so stasis will always be on there, no matter what you're doing, it will always be providing stasis if you're having this node in. That is the case here. If you don't have such a thing, then for example like Blood Flow Blood will still just deal burn and shock, so it does not care about that whatsoever. So keep that in mind, please. There are skills again like Bleeding Edge that just deal rand damage from nature, so it will always have bleed. But if you get the Keystone node, which is Grievous Afflictions, it can still choose your highest ailment damage, which is not from a weapon, which in my case would be from this ring, which is 22 to 32 lightning damage, which is higher than anything else that I have on my accessory slots, which are the only slots as far as I know that can roll damage to attack mods for this build, essentially. The same basically goes for spells, but it's a little bit more complicated for those because you have to keep in account that you could have a catalyst right here, which will also give you some damage to spells, and some spells have their their original element. For example, the Consuming Embers will always deal fire damage and so on. And if you have Grievous Afflictions, it will then choose your second highest added damage type from all your gear, I think, and it does not matter if it's just from your catalyst or if it's just from accessories. Some care about your weapon, but you have to figure that out yourself. But again, it will always choose your highest and or your second highest ailment depending on what ability you're choosing. So I hope that cleared a little bit up about what is going on. And again, for weapons, if you're not reliant on anything that you have to socket in here, for example, this weapon would also, or not this weapon right here, would also still be totally fine for my purposes, right? It would still apply toxic to my Tracker's Reach without any problem, and the damage would not be that much lower if I would compare it to any other weapon that has like this exact same stats, but just socket it in pure physical gems, right? There is no difference whatsoever for a lot of skills, like for example Bleeding Edge, which only cares about the maximum average amount of your total damage on the weapon and does not care about whatever is on there, right? So keep that in mind, and yeah, just test it out, have fun with it. If there are any more questions, just post them in the comments. Maybe consider subscribing to this YouTube channel. I will provide some more awesome content in the future. Maybe. I'm not yet sure about that. We'll have to see about how the game is progressing, where it's going, how the patches are going in the future. And as for now, we'll obviously play PoE again, which is my main game. And I will have a lot of fun in there, hopefully. And yeah, if there are again any questions, post them in the comments, consider subscribing and or following me on my Twitch. And I wish you all a wonderful day and have a great time in this game. Bye bye.